Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Word Leader podcast. Today, I'm excited to be interviewing one of Trivium Writing's clients, David Diehl, who just recently published his very first book titled The Umbrella on November 21st, 2022. The reason I wanted to bring David on the podcast is to talk about the process which we worked on together to write and publish his book, and to discuss the experience of becoming a first-time author. So, David, thank you so much for taking the time today to come on the show and talk about your experience and the process and what people can expect from, becoming an author. Before we talk about all of these things, all of the process, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what the book is about and how these two things tie together?
Sure. First, let me just thank you for having me on today, Leandre. I look forward to our conversation together. The foundation for the book, I guess, would be who I was over the course of my life as a minister and educator, and now as a professional coach. What I wanted to do was to create some a learning product that or a product that I could use with my clients to guide them through the process that I developed over my mid to late years in life to get through difficult things. And so the benefit of the book is that there's a process that has specific instructions. It's a 15-step process that the readers will learn about and learn how to apply. And there's there's not only there's the instruction, but then there's stories that were used to exemplify how the process can be effective. And then in the last part of the book, we've included a journal of worksheets so that the reader of the book can have a manual ready for them to be able to use at any point in time that they need to work through a particular difficult life situation. And I wrote the book because I wanted to have some impact on some people and continue to give during this last season of my own life. And so the umbrella is a way for me to be able to do that. And I would think we've been able to achieve that so far.
Awesome. So one of the things that I find really interesting about you is that you've had these sort of three different careers. First, you were a minister, and then you went into education, and now you are a professional coach. And of course, especially in the coaching industry, a lot of coaches write books. It's a great product for them to use. But I'm curious about these two other careers and how that may have impacted the book and your desire to write the book, because of course your book in a lot of ways is a coaching product. It helps the reader almost coach themselves through these difficult life situations. But I'm wondering, how did that, how did these three careers impact the way that you thought about the book? Because I can see some intersections between these careers and the way that we've built the book.
Interesting question. Thank you for asking it. I think that as you were asking the question, I was thinking back on the ministry and how I implemented the ministry, and then with education and how I implemented education. I see myself doing the same thing. In the ministry, I used other people's products to minister to people, whether it was a book or a booklet, or if I left a little booklet of encouragement at a hospital bedside, or if I went into a home and I took with me, in my briefcase, some or backpack or whatever I was using, some resources that would be accessible, and I would use my discretion as to what I would leave in that home after my visit. So it occurred to me that I'm using other people's materials. Same thing in education. You use other people's written textbooks to teach students. And I think that in this case, I really, at this age of my life, I realized that I've got as much insight, knowledge, and wisdom as the next person on a lot of things, particularly on dealing with difficult situations. And so why not write my own book? And when I put my own wisdom and my own knowledge and my own process in a book that I could leave with people.
Very interesting. One of the things that we did together to put this book together was to create this concept and this metaphor of the umbrella. But before there was the umbrella, there was your what you call your QRDA process, which is the thinking model that you came up with over the course of your life to deal with these negative life situations. Can you tell us a little bit more about when and how you came up with that process?
Sure. Maybe a little bit of background too would help. In my family life, I grew up in a large family. We grew up in a sort of a backward thinking family, or not fully developed, naive mindset about life. Our parents were very authoritative and demanding, and didn't give us a lot of freedom to move around and make our own decisions and even think for ourselves. So I grew up not having some fully developed thought processes, and it started coming out in my young adult life, and in my marriage and my parenting and my ministry to people. And I could see it, but I was very insecure and didn't have a lot of personal confidence in myself in some areas. I projected that I did, but deep inside I really didn't. And so when the divorce ended and the ministry ended, and life crashed in around me, I really had thought about giving up life, but instead of choosing that route, I decided I needed to find a way to get through this. I knew I had it inside of me. I didn't know how to get it out of me. I did do some therapy, and I did some deep thinking, and some reading, and took some courses on in psychology to try to understand the mind and how it works better, and how you can change your thinking around things. I've read a lot of thinking systems books, and got my education and degrees, and in the process, I began to develop a series of questions you refer to as the QDRA. That the QDRA is question, a reflection, decision, and action. I was reading what I wrote down, and I wrote it down opposite, and I had to think through that for a second there. So it's QRDA rather, and QRDA: question, reflection, decision, and action. And I developed an initial set of questions that helped me to think more specific and deeper, and even broader about whatever the conflict that I was dealing with. And those questions grew into a series of 15 questions. And so I used those in like my late 30s or early 40s is when that process developed. And it expanded until it got to 15 questions. And again, the process helped me to think more deeply, more specific and factual about the crisis that I was facing. And then it helped me to consider what others might think, helped me to consider what I wanted to be thinking about the situation. What thinking do I prefer? And then move into making decisions about what's going to help me to get there, and what actions I can engage in that will help me to make that thinking permanent as a part of my mindset. And I based all of that around what I call a belief system that's based upon 5 additional focus questions. And then I asked myself, okay, what did I learn from this experience? And what is it that I learned that I would be able to share with other people? And so that process led to, if we went to jump forward real in a big leap, and led to our engagement. And we were just engaging about, you challenged me about needing a metaphor, and we contemplated that over a few weeks. And I was watching a series called The Umbrella Academy, and the umbrella, I just began to fixate on the umbrella, and just got thinking about how the umbrella's purpose is to protect us and to guide us to that safe place. And that's really the way our thinking serves us, is to guide us and to help us to make better decisions, and help us to engage in better actions to get us to that safer place that where we can be less anxious and more productive and more happier. And so you and I got together in that conversation, and we figured out that's a great metaphor for the QRDA process. So the umbrella is equivalent to a physical umbrella. The umbrella, as it relates to the book, is a symbolic thinking umbrella. So in the book, you'll see graphics and tables that share the connection between the two. But the purpose basically of the physical umbrella is the same as the symbolic umbrella, or vice versa. And so what we have here is a tangible physical umbrella that serves to protect us and to sustain that protection and to guide us to that safe place. A well-constructed, developed thinking umbrella mindset, a person's way of thinking, serves to protect, sustain that protection, and to guide us to that safe place in life.
Excellent. One of the things that you mentioned about the book is that you considered a lot of different thinking models from other people. And in fact, in the book, you mentioned that this isn't a scientific or an academic book, although you did read a lot of literature and a lot of different books on the topic. One of the things that often bog down people when it comes to writing a book is that they feel there were already so many books written on a particular topic, on their topic of choice, and they feel imposter syndrome at the thought of adding to that body of knowledge, because they feel as though, they wonder, what could I possibly bring to that conversation? And so the work that we did together, your book does a really great job of articulating, your own framework while also considering frameworks that other people, and it does a nice, it includes a lot of different ways of thinking, if you will. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what that was like for you, considering, there were a lot of books on the topic already, how you consider that in your approach, and if and how you dealt with the imposter syndrome.
Well, I definitely had the imposter syndrome, and I've always had that to deal with throughout my life. Whatever I've done, but some people have said I've overachieved to compensate for it because I have so many degrees. Well, I have so many degrees because my first 2 degrees were in theology, and once the ministry crashed and I had no work, I had to retool myself for something, and I ended up in education. As far as, so in my education, I've learned how to do scientific writing. I have a dissertation in instructional technology and a doctorate degree in education, teaching and learning. So I know how to do all of that. And I have read a lot on thinking systems, and those books are still in my library. And I thought to myself, well, which one am I going to use to write this book? And there's so many of them. And then if I get into all of the scientific parts of it, what readers am I going to lose? So I had to consider, well, what's the best approach for this book? Is it going to be for the scientific academic minded people? Well, I didn't, that's done, and it's going to continue to be done throughout the history of this world, because people are studying what the brain is all about and how it works and how it can be impacted and how it can be manipulated and changed and used in more effective ways. So there are people out there that are doing that. I'm retired. I don't want to do that kind of work anymore. And so I made a decision along the way that this needed to be a really practical, down-to-earth book without all of the scientific jargon, and just simply base it upon my personal experience. And that's what I've done. I say in the book that this isn't a scientific book, and I offer the books that influence my own thinking. But I chose not to copy and paste somebody else's model and to to write the book, just regurgitate what other people have done. If you want to read scientific books, there are plenty of them, and I've given you some resources in the book, some references in the book, some really fine readings. I mean, there's some incredible books out there on this. But I just base this on my experience, what I worked out for myself, as I had gone through some therapy, some counseling sessions, and talked with close confidants and read these books and try to figure it out for myself. How am I going to get through this? How am I going to redo my thinking so that I can feel better about myself, so that I can make better decisions and engage in better actions, so that I could create the life that I prefer to live.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes the book excellent. The fact that you bring up a lot of stories, both from your life and other people's lives, and that you really base that framework on your experience. For people wanting to write books and feeling as though that there's no way they can contribute something, I think the approach that we took for your book was a really good one, because of course, there's a lot of scientific literature, there are a lot of books on the topic, but the way that you articulated that is unique and is going to appeal to a certain audience. And so in your case, you were going for Gen Zs, millennials, and there is a unique set of issues that you faced that is, that resonates with certain segments of that demographic. So I think it's important to recognize how much the personal experience and the personal story can play a role in the book, and in fact, that's what makes these kinds of books a lot easier to read and a lot easier to digest for a general audience versus more academic, more scientific books. Now, talking about the book and the process more specifically, so you started, when did that desire to write a book start exactly? Was it as you began your coaching business, or did you already have this desire prior to that?
Yeah, I've had the desire for many years. Work and life situations kept me from doing that. Really knowing what to write about. I think a book I would have written 10 or 15 years ago would not be this book. So I think all of the experiences and knowledge and processes that I've gone through has resulted in this book. And then my engagement with you. So help me to go back to your question, your specific question, because I got off track of my.
Yeah, so I was asking about when you and let me rephrase that. So when did you actually get serious about really wanting to write and publish that book? And maybe we can segue into the process. I know you were looking for somebody to help you. So what was that like in the beginning, and how did you go about finding the help that you needed?
Sure. As my retirement began to be in my face, I did start thinking about what I could write about in my time, and I knew that I was going to do something. I think that what really pushed me forward into it as quickly after retiring was COVID, because once we were locked down, and I had in my business, in my preparing to go into coaching business, I had rented an office space and was in the process of developing some contracts and marketing process to get clients. And COVID shut us down. I gave up the office space because I couldn't use it any longer, and so I realized, wow, I'm locked up here in the house. I took whatever business I had to Zoom like everybody else. And then I realized what a great time it was for me what a great opportunity it was for me to get started on writing the book. And so that's what got me actually in the process. And then I realized I needed some help to get the right mindset for writing the book because of my education experience. Most of what I've had written was curriculum, step-by-step instruction, and I didn't want my book to be mechanical. Or too technical. I wanted to be very practical and an easy read and easy application of my process. So I began to search for someone who could help me to balance my technical side with an appropriate mindset for writing stories and to bring the two together. And so I did my online search, and that led me to you.
Awesome. And so we did a lot of work in terms of the storytelling, in terms of really developing a structure that's compelling for readers. What do you think are some of the things that you've learned through this process? And the reason I'm asking this is, you came from an academic background. Of course, there are significant differences between writing a nonfiction book for the general public versus writing, say, an academic paper or thesis and so forth. But a lot of people that consider writing nonfiction books, there are people that are either in business, perhaps they're an expert, a lot of coaches and consultants. And so they all come from different writing backgrounds, if you will. Perhaps they're used to doing a bit more business writing. Perhaps it's more academic or scientific like you, or perhaps it's more informal. It's more marketing based or copywriting. So what are some of the things that you learned working together about writing a nonfiction book for your audience?
So as we started the process, I was confused on how to approach writing the book. I realized that there are stories, and actually we started out really with just my story, but my story was so massive, and it was like a verbal vomit on paper, on digital on the computer, I guess. And it was just from the very beginning of life to where I am now, and it was just huge and a lot of detail. That was the first version, mixed in with my instructional stuff, my QRDA process, and what wisdom I gained along the way. And it was like three books in one. In fact, one of my reviewers said that, this is kind of like overwhelming. You've got 3 books in one here, and it seems like you need to focus on something. And so that was once we got out the original version, the first draft of it, and we took a good look at it, we realized that there had to be a significant change in the format and the focus of the book. And that's one of the benefits in working with you. I was able to, when we were able to use these Zoom sessions as sort of an open space, a trusting space, and trust. I say trusting because I'd learned over some months that I could trust you with my truth, my intimate details of my life that I just wouldn't put out there for anybody. And if anything, I learned that there are certain things that don't need to be put out there just for anybody. And so that open space that we had on Zoom, it was a free-flowing, easygoing conversations and a trusting environment where I was able to just think openly and not be accountable for whatever came up, and knowing that I could trust the process where it's going to get us to where we needed to be with the book.
Yes. So one of the great things about the way we collaborated on this book was that we really were able to be honest with one another and get great feedback on how we work through your ideas. What do you think has changed in your writing mindset? You mentioned earlier that one of the things that you were really looking for in getting help with was to change your mindset around writing. How would you describe that mindset in writing a nonfiction book, or what changed in the way that you view writing since we worked on the umbrella?
I'm not as fearful of it any longer. Actually, now that the book is out and people are buying it, and I look at the book, I can see the book more objectively now, and I realize it's a good book. It's a solid process. They're solid stories that bring out the process, and it's practical and useful. And so I think that oh my goodness, I think that again, I've lost my thoughts. Tell me the question that you asked.
Yeah, so I was wondering about your new writing mindset. You did mention earlier that
Thank you.
you were looking for to change your mindset because you had a very academic background when it comes to writing. So I was wondering how your view of writing changed, and maybe if you can expand a little bit about what you meant in terms of you being fearful of writing in the past and now not being so fearful anymore.
I think the fear of writing was just that idea that I'm fake, that I really don't know what I'm talking about. And there's so many more higher level academians out there that have a true grasp on whatever I might write about, that I couldn't really add anything of substance to the discussion. And I think that through our process, I've been able to overcome that kind of thinking and realize that whatever it is I experienced and in my life and whatever I've learned from it could certainly make a difference in somebody's life, even if it's one person. And I say in the book, at these seasons of my life, I just want to, if I could help one person improve themselves and save themselves, then it's worth it. No matter how many copies might sell, which really isn't that significant, other than to say that I'd like for it to get it in as many people's hands as possible. But as far as the writing mindset, I think I've lost the fear of writing. I also have a better structure in my head about how to approach the writing. I know how to structure sentences and paragraphs for nonfiction writing. So that it's made a difference. Our working together has made a difference in the way that I construct and put together ideas and help them flow, and to reach that place where you make the point that you want to make. So I think that those two things probably are the biggest things that it's biggest changes that I've been able to achieve in working with the process that you've offered.
Yeah, two things come to my mind as you're saying this. The first one is that it's a very prevalent fear that people have, even people who are objectively experts in their field, that there is always some academics or some experts that have more to say, or something better to say. And it is really a misconception, because at the end of the day, no book can reach everyone, and what matters as much as the content is how it's articulated. It's the personality of the book. It's the personality of the author. And I think you've done an excellent job of showcasing who you are through that book, and that's what makes it appealing to the audience that you wanted to reach. And so what you were saying earlier is a really good reminder that we shouldn't be so worried about there being so many books about a topic, or that we can't add something, because there is always a gap in whatever is available. And I think the best way to write a book, which is really what you did by looking at all the other books on thinking and on thinking systems, it was finding that gap that you can fill for the audience, and also making that personable through your story, through your personality. And you've done a very good job of incorporating these elements of your life. And what I mean by that is in the structure of that book, you know, we can kind of sense the intersection of the, you know, the educator, the minister, and also the professional coach. So I think it's an important reminder to realize that there can be a new book, you know, on a topic, and it's going to cater to, you know, the people that you write it for. The second thing, actually, I'm forgetting the second thing now. You were talking about the writing and how you're now structuring. The really interesting thing about the writing process, especially the process of writing a nonfiction book, is that you can really see your expertise and you can really see your ideas, and by working on them the way that we did together, that's really where you get the validation that a lot of us need to feel as though, you know, we're not fake, we are actually an expert in our field. And so it's really great to hear you talk about this. And, you know, you mentioned something about having a structure now in your mind, and, you know, knowing how to construct sentences and paragraphs. And it was really amazing working with you, because I could really tell there was a difference between, you know, when we first started working together versus later on as we worked through that manuscript. It really made a big difference.
Yeah, that's a great dovetail on what I was going to say next. I think when I first started writing, you know, I wrote these long paragraphs and long sentences and connect and talk and address several topics in the one paragraph, one big long paragraph. And one of the things that I realize now, that when I approach the next book, I already have this now structure in my head, and the rules, so to speak, for writing what a paragraph, you know, address one topic in a paragraph, have a paragraph about 8 to 12 or 15 sentences, make your sentences about, or maybe I have that wrong, about 100 words in a paragraph or so, and about 12 to 15 words per sentence. It's those kinds of things that I didn't know. You know, we were taught to write. We didn't learn those kinds of things in school. And so just creating small paragraphs so that people could get through the idea quickly and move on to the next idea, or build upon that idea in the next couple of paragraphs, keeping the sentences short, those kinds of, and then, you know, using the right tenses, and you know, we write a lot how we speak, and we don't realize that many times we use grammar incorrectly. We just pass it off. But when you start putting it in writing and you start seeing those errors, it's really fascinating how many errors can be in a paragraph, and we're not even aware of it. We just write. And then when we start analyzing it for correctness, you know, that's it. I mean, even in the last versions of this book, you know, you and I are going back and forth, you know, the to be verb using improperly and things of that nature. So I can see things like that where I couldn't see them before. And I think going into my next book, I'm going to be able to write so much quicker and so much smoother and appropriate. It won't take as much editing, and the ideas are going to be more vivid because I've got this strategy down now.
That's awesome. What would you tell somebody who is wanting to write their first book? What advice or what strategies would you give them?
Oh, that's good. From my experience, I would sit down and think about what you want to write. You know, I kind of had an idea, but it was mixed with too many ideas. So maybe just really sit down with a pen and paper and think through, what is it that I really want to get across. In my book, I wanted to help people to have a process that was simple, that they could use to think through things and to create better thinking, once again, to make better decisions, to engage in better actions, to create a situation they preferred. So I didn't know that to begin with. And it took a long time to finally get to that with me. But I did get there. So I would say this next time I write, I'm going to sit down and say, okay, I want to write on this topic. This is what I want the people to get from this book. And I'd back out of that and I'd start figuring out what's it going to take to get to that point. So I would just say, and really sitting down and reflecting and asking the questions about what you want to really share and what does the framework of the book look like, and how many chapters is it going to be, and you know, what topic's going to fill those chapters. I think bringing that to the table with a writing coach, would give you a big head start.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, David, for your time. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
A pleasure chatting with you. If you don't mind, I'd like to summarize this by just reading from the beginning of the book. It summarizes what the book is about, and
please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So in this book, you'll find a description of my model for managing difficult life situations. It offers step-by-step instructions and supportive resources to apply. The book tells the story of my most challenging life situation, as well as the stories of others, and it presents how we turn them into better situations. That is why I wrote this book, to help other people think, feel better, make better decisions, and engage in better actions, all to create the life they want to live. So I wanted to read that because that reflects the process that we went through. And we're talking about the process today. And I didn't have that process. I had the QRDA process down, but I didn't have the umbrella metaphor down, and I didn't have the whole, you know, everything that went into the book down. And so the process that we went through, we sort of created as we went along. You had a general idea of what we needed to do, but for me, you customized what we needed to do, and we got to where we needed to be. And that's paragraph summarizes what we accomplished together.
That's excellent. Right. Thank you so much, David. So I'm going to put in the show notes the link to buy your book, The Umbrella, as well as your social media links so that people can connect with you and give you feedback on the book once they've read it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, David.
Thank you. Again, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.